mixing a little bit. I was talking about the October 7th attacks, was where a lot of independent journalists or other nations' journalists were brought in, and they were allowed to look at basically all the footage and the evidence, the forensic stuff collected, and then make their evaluations on what happened. That would have been
on the Hamas attack. Yes, on the Hamas attack, absolutely.
For the stuff going on the attacks in Gaza, other people are trying to verify the numbers. I mean, at the end of the day, these all come from the Gazan Health Ministry and the IDF, which are really the only two sources we can rely on. And then U.S. intelligence making statements, or open source intelligence making statements about, like, for instance, initially people had claimed that Israel had bombed the parking lot of that one hospital, and a ton of independent people looked into it, and they arrived at the conclusion that it was most likely a mortar failure or something. These are the types of things I'm looking at. I wouldn't just go by Israel saying, like, oh, look, we said this thing, or by video footage and stuff that Israel's releasing, and like evaluating that and looking at other people's evaluations of that. I agree that we shouldn't just take Israel at face value.
Right, but if Israel does X and the human rights organizations say stop doing X in order to not violate international law, that is saying you're violating international law.
I mean, like I said, I read the ICJ opinion, and they didn't say to stop doing X. They just said, be careful. There's a possibility that you might be genociding people. Like, you need to take every precaution and be careful. They didn't say stop the military operation.
But that's not exculpatory, right?
I didn't say it was exculpatory. I'm just saying.
No.
Yeah. Or go on.
What I'm saying is, the purpose of that hearing was not to make a determination about whether or not they were committing genocide.
Correct. It was a statutory thing, basically.
Right.
Like, yeah.
So, right. So. It's like if I get accused of robbing a bank and I go in for my preliminary hearing and my lawyer's like, can we drop this charge? And the judge looks at the video footage of me with a mask on and says, there's reason to think you might have done this. We're gonna proceed to trial. And then I walk out saying, the judge didn't say I was guilty. Judge didn't say I robbed. Of course not. That wasn't what it was for.
Sure.
And Israel's actually trumpeted that decision or the response of the court in a way that would suggest that somehow the court's failure to say that they were committing genocide, or in my example, the judges or jury's decision say that I didn't rob the bank, is somehow evidence that I wasn't doing something wrong.
I 1,000,000,000% agree. It could be that in 1 month, the ICJ, because you're correct, I agree with you, this ruling was to make sure that South Africa had grounds to bring the case, and that prima facie it looked like it could have been, is there a genocide happening? Well, they looked at the facts, like, there's a lot of civilian deaths, there's been a lot of crazy statements, I agree, by Israeli leadership.
Yes.
It's possible, we'll look into it. I'm not citing that to say, like, oh, well, look, they didn't say to stop right now, right? You're at pre-trial, so you must be innocent. I'm just saying that I'm not aware of any credible organization that said, we are saying 100% this is a war crime. I'll see a lot of things saying, like, if Israel targeted this hospital just to kill civilians, that's a war crime. Or if Israel continues to do this, this is a war crime. Collective punishment, if they engage in this, that's a war crime. But I haven't heard any resolute statements of, like, and I might have just missed those.
Just as a diplomatic matter, they rarely will say you're doing this.
Okay, that's fair, but that's a different statement earlier when you were like, they've said they're committing war crimes.
I'm only speaking about the UN.
Okay, sure. Okay, go ahead. Sorry,
I'm only speaking about the UN.
Okay.
I'm going to the other ones, but the other ones have said that. But I'm saying the UN won't say that. What the UN will say is similar to what the ICJ said is, look, there's a chance you're committing war crimes. We're not saying you're committing war crimes, but it's plausible you are. These statements sound crazy. It sounds like you're advocating genocide. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to tell you not to do these 4 things.
Yeah.
Right. And what are those 4 things? The literal textbook definition of genocide is that Israel's saying, well, that's what we've always been doing. We've always taken reasonable precaution. Yeah. We've always done all the things. And so Israel's definition of reasonable precaution is wildly different, I think, than the bulk of the international community.
Potentially, which is why I think it's good that the ICJ, as part of that ruling, said you need to prepare a report in 1 month and then we'll go over it. I think that was a good thing for the ICJ to do, and I would hope that Israel would, to some extent, as best as they can, participate in that to hopefully exonerate themselves in the eyes of the International Court of Justice. I think that was a good thing for them to do. Yeah.
We don't think we're committing war crimes, but let's let a dispassionate third party decide. They're saying we're going to do what we're going to do regardless.
I understand that that's true, but I think we both agree, though, that there is going to be some, like, tough talk from politicians that won't completely line up with military action. So, for instance, there have been, I won't even say borderline, there have been, like, genocidal statements made by some Israeli leaders or some members of the Israeli government, for sure. And they say those things, and, they're in a post-October 7th mindset, and they want to, look tough to their civilian population. But I think it's pretty clear when you look at how the military is operating that they are trying their best to stay within the corridors of international law, because they know that if they, like, for instance, that Israel lost a lot of international support in the days following that parking lot explosion, when people were accusing them of having blown up that hospital. Israel's response to that, and you can see when they get accused of things like that, their response to the white flag thing when they shot those 3 Israeli hostages, their response to that hospital parking lot bombing that people initially accused them of, their response wasn't, well, we said we were going to do whatever we want. Fuck you guys. We're going to do whatever we want. We're big dogging it. We don't care about you guys. They were like, hold on. This was a huge act. It's kind of like when Russia like saber rattles and like, we're moving our nukes because we're going to bomb you guys. But they do everything very much in the open so that the rest of the world can see, so that they're not going to do people, right? Yeah, I agree with you that the rhetoric is troubling. I'm trying to look at action on the ground. And I think for the most part, when you look at the civilian deaths, which are tragic, but you look at the percentage of military people killed, or at least claimed by Israel to be killed, and you look at the actions so far, it doesn't. What?
I say which we disagree on. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.